Ma'am, I'm going to need your cooperation here. The words sliced through the hushed elegance of the sterling private lounge at Van Nuys Airport like a knife through silk. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Heads turned. The scent of Sumatran coffee hung in the air, suddenly bitter. Dr. Simone Harper lowered her worn paperback novel, a first edition Toni Morrison she'd carried through 3 continents, and looked up. Her locks, intricate and elegant, framed a face of quiet intelligence. Dark eyes that had negotiated billion-dollar deals met the nervous gaze of the woman standing before her. She wore no logos, no flashy jewelry, just charcoal gray trousers and a deep burgundy cashmere sweater. Comfortable leather flats. Understated. Invisible. Exactly as she'd intended. The gate agent, Jennifer Martinez, stood before her tablet clutched like a shield against her chest. Her name tag caught the recessed lighting. Behind Jennifer, a man in an electric blue Gucci jacket lounged against the espresso bar, arms crossed, watching with the smug satisfaction of someone who'd just won an argument he hadn't needed to have. "Is there a problem?" Simone asked, her voice low, measured, the kind of calm that made people lean in to hear her. Jennifer's eyes flickered, nervous, apologetic, but firm. "As I explained to the lounge, we have an oversold situation. Due to an unexpected aircraft swap, we have 1 less seat than originally booked passengers." She gestured vaguely toward the man in blue. "Mr. Ashford here is a priority VIP client. Given the circumstances, we're going to have to bump you to the flight tomorrow morning. We'll provide compensation, of course." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a verdict delivered with the false sympathy of someone who'd already decided the outcome before opening their mouth. Simone sat perfectly still. Her fingers, long and steady, rested on the book's worn spine. She didn't blink. She didn't shift in her seat. But something inside her, something forged in boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Shanghai, something sharpened by a lifetime of being underestimated, clicked into place like the safety coming off a weapon. The audit had begun. And on what basis was that decision made? Simone asked, her voice unchanged. Still calm, still measured. But now there was an edge to it, a quiet precision that made Jennifer's tablet tremble slightly in her hands. Around the lounge, other passengers had stopped what they were doing. A woman in a navy blue suit name tag, barely visible on her leather folio, reading Dr. Elena Torres, slowly pulled out her phone. A man beside her, sharp-eyed with a journalist's instinct, noticed and did the same. Near the espresso bar, a young lounge attendant with kind eyes and a name tag reading Sophie Kim watched nervously, hands frozen mid-wipe on the marble counter. "Well, it's—" Jennifer stammered, thrown off balance by the direct analytical question. "It's standard procedure. We have to prioritize our most valued clients. And Mr. Ashford is your most valued client," Simone asked, her gaze unwavering, steady as a laser. "May I ask what metric you're using to determine that? Is it frequency of travel? Total revenue generated?" She paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable, just long enough for everyone in the lounge to lean in. Or is it based on the volume of his voice? A ripple of suppressed laughter moved through the space. An older man in an expensive but understated suit lowered his Wall Street Journal, revealing silver hair and eyes that had seen too many boardrooms to count. Across the room, phones began to lift subtly, fingers hovering over record buttons. That's when the man in the electric blue jacket pushed off the espresso bar. Blake Ashford, 38 years old, walking billboard for cryptocurrency money made fast and spent faster. His expensive sneakers deliberately scuffed in that calculated way that screamed, "I paid someone to make these look authentic," squeaked on the polished floor as he strode forward. He loomed over Simone's chair, using his height, his presence, his physical mass as a weapon. "Look, lady," he said, voice carrying across the entire lounge. "I don't know who you think you are, but I have a 7-figure crypto portfolio. I'm meeting with Klaus Schwab tonight at the Aspen Economic Forum. I have a private table at Nobu. My time is worth more per hour than most people make in a month." He looked her up and down, his lip curling slightly. "You look like you're heading to a book club." Behind him, a woman appeared. Tiffany Ashford, 32, surgically perfected features locked in a state of perpetual disdain. Designer tracksuit that cost more than most monthly rents. She clung to Blake's arm like an accessory, surveying the room with the kind of bored contempt reserved for people who'd never been told no. "Seriously," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This place is supposed to be exclusive. Like there should be standards." Simone tilted her head slightly, as if considering them not with anger or even offense, but with the kind of clinical curiosity a scientist might have for an interesting invasive species. Then she smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but with the faint knowing curve of someone who has just been handed every card in the deck and is deciding how slowly to play them. "Before we go any further," she said quietly, each word deliberate, "I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly." She stood slowly, deliberately setting her book down on the side table with care. The movement was graceful, controlled, and somehow it shifted the entire energy of the room. She was no longer the woman being dismissed. She was the woman in command. "You." She looked at Jennifer. "Have decided, without reviewing my travel history, my account status, or my booking details, to remove me from a flight I confirmed and paid for 3 weeks ago." Jennifer opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "And you?" Simone turned to Blake. "Believe that your cryptocurrency balance and your dinner reservations make you more important than any other passenger in this lounge." Blake smirked, puffing out his chest. "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Some people just matter more. That's how the world works." Simone nodded once, as if filing that information away in a mental database. Then she reached into her leather tote bag and pulled out her phone. "Before we continue, I need to know, are you watching this from home? At work, on your commute? Drop your location in the comments, because what happens next will leave you speechless." "One call," Simone said softly, her voice carrying despite its quietness. "That's all this will take." Blake laughed, a harsh bark of amusement. "Lady, you're delusional. What are you going to do? Leave a bad Yelp review? But before we see what Simone does next, you need to understand who these people really are. Because this moment didn't just happen. It was built over lifetimes. Dr. Simone Harper was 45 years old, though you wouldn't know it from her face. What aged her wasn't time, but memory. She was the founder and CEO of Aviation Technologies, a company worth $3.2 billion. Her software ran the navigation and logistics systems in over 4,000 aircraft worldwide. Every Boeing 787 manufactured since 2019 had her company's code in its bones. She was the silent heartbeat of private aviation, the invisible hand that kept planes in the sky. But today, dressed in simple clothes, carrying a worn book, sitting alone in a lounge her company actually owned, she was just another passenger. Just another black woman who didn't fit someone else's definition of important. This wasn't the first time. When Simone was 28, she'd walked into a private terminal in Houston, fresh off a red-eye flight, exhausted from closing her first major contract. She'd worn a professional pantsuit, carried a leather briefcase, had a confirmed first-class ticket. The gate agent had looked at her, then at the ticket, then back at her and said, "Are you traveling with someone? Is this a corporate account?" The underlying message was clear. You couldn't afford this yourself. She'd provided 3 forms of ID before they let her board. Meanwhile, 2 white men in jeans and T-shirts had walked right through, no questions asked. That night, lying in her hotel room, she'd made a decision. She wouldn't just succeed in this industry. She'd change it. She'd build something so significant, so undeniable, that no one could ever question whether she belonged. 20 years later, she'd done exactly that. She'd built Apex Aviation from her garage, coding through the night, living on ramen and coffee, pouring every dollar and every dream into the work. She'd acquired Skyalite Executive Flights 3 years ago using her mother's maiden name, S. Williams, to keep her ownership quiet. She wanted to see how her company treated passengers when they didn't know the owner was watching. Today, she was getting her answer. And it was devastating. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory words, spoken decades ago in a different airport after a different humiliation. Get strong, baby. Get smart. And when you have the power, make sure nobody else feels what we're feeling right now. Across the lounge, Blake Ashford was still smirking, completely unaware that the ground beneath his feet was about to open up and swallow him whole. Blake was a crypto influencer, self-proclaimed entrepreneur, and walking embodiment of new money with old attitudes. He'd made his fortune during the cryptocurrency boom, parlaying $100,000 into $8 million through a combination of timing luck and shameless self-promotion. His Instagram had 200,000 followers. His Twitter was a constant stream of humble brags and motivational quotes stolen from better minds. He wore his wealth like armor, electric blue jacket rose, gold watch so heavy it looked like a beautiful, expensive handcuff designer everything. He spoke in buzzwords, disrupting paradigms, leveraging brand equity, synergizing vertical markets. He name-dropped relentlessly Klaus Schwab, Elon Musk, Gary Vaynerchuk. But underneath the noise was a deep, gnawing insecurity. He knew on some level that his fortune was built on sand. That crypto could crash tomorrow. That his influence was rented, not owned. So he compensated by being the loudest person in every room, by demanding recognition, by treating service workers like NPCs in his personal video game. His wife, Tiffany, was his perfect complement. 32 years old, former Instagram model turned lifestyle influencer. She'd built a following by posting aspirational content, designer handbags, first-class lounges, 5-star hotels. Her entire identity was constructed around being exclusive, around being better than. She sneered at anything ordinary, dismissed anyone unpolished, and treated anyone working in service like they were invisible. They'd arrived at the lounge like a weather system, loud, disruptive, impossible to ignore. Blake had been on his phone bellowing into it about disrupting the paradigm and closing deals. Tiffany had immediately complained about the champagne selection, the Wi-Fi speed, the brand of almond milk. When Sophie Kim, the young lounge attendant, had tried to help offering alternatives, Tiffany had waved her off like an insect. That's not the point. If you're going to charge premium prices, you should have premium options. Do better. Sophie's smile had tightened, but she'd nodded and retreated. She'd been working at Skylight for 3 years. She was 26, putting herself through business school, working double shifts to pay tuition. She loved the job, loved interacting with interesting people, loved the glimpse into a world she was determined to one day fully enter. But moments like this made her question everything. She'd watched Blake and Tiffany treat people like props in their performance. She'd watched Jennifer, her supervisor, enable it. And she'd watched this quiet woman in the burgundy sweater sit there with such dignity, such calm strength, that Sophie had wanted to speak up. But she was scared. Scared of losing her job, scared of being labeled difficult, scared of stepping out of line, until she couldn't be silent anymore. Jennifer Martinez, the gate agent, was 34 years old and drowning in invisible stress. Single mother of a 7-year-old daughter, working this job to keep health insurance and a steady paycheck. She'd been with Skylight for 8 years, watching management change, policies shift, but the core message remaining the same: keep the high-value clients happy. The problem was, no one had ever clearly defined high value. It was always subjective, always based on gut feeling, always vulnerable to bias she didn't even realize she held. When her supervisor, Richard Caldwell, had called that morning and said Blake Ashford was flying today and needed priority treatment, she'd asked why. Richard had said, "He's influential. He has connections. He's the kind of client we need to keep happy." So, when the oversold situation happened, when the aircraft swap left them 1 seat short, Jennifer had looked around the lounge and made a calculation. She'd seen Blake loud and demanding. She'd seen this woman quiet and alone. She'd seen expensive clothes versus simple clothes. She'd seen someone who looked important versus someone who didn't, and she'd made the worst decision of her career. Now, holding her tablet, watching this woman stand and command the room with nothing but her voice, Jennifer felt the foundation of her world cracking beneath her feet. Across the lounge, Dr. Elena Torres, 41-year-old pediatric surgeon, watched the scene unfold with growing anger. She was on her way to Aspen for an emergency surgery, a 9-year-old girl with a brain tumor. Every minute mattered. But even with her urgency, she couldn't stay silent in the face of what she was witnessing. She'd been flying private for 15 years. She'd seen this pattern before. The quiet dismissal of people who didn't fit a certain image. The instant prioritization of those who did. She'd benefited from it herself, light-skinned Hispanic woman with professional credentials displayed openly. She'd walked through gates that might have closed for others. But watching it happen to someone else, watching this woman be humiliated simply for existing in a space she'd paid to access, Elena couldn't stomach it. She raised her phone higher, making sure the recording was clear. Beside her, Michael Grant, 36-year-old investigative journalist, felt his instincts firing. He'd broken stories about corporate discrimination before. He knew the pattern unconscious bias enabled by weak management ignored until someone with power forced change. This story was writing itself. And in the back of the lounge, George Mitchell, 67-year-old retired Fortune 500 CEO, set down his newspaper completely. He'd spent 40 years in boardrooms and private clubs. He'd seen this movie before. Hell, he'd been complicit in it before staying silent when he should have spoken, prioritizing comfort over courage. Not today. Not anymore. Simone didn't respond to Blake's taunt. She simply held her phone finger hovering over the screen and turned to Jennifer. "Ms. Martinez," she said, her voice calm but carrying authority that made every person in the room straighten unconsciously. "I'd like to see the policy that allows you to remove a confirmed passenger based on subjective criteria." Jennifer's face flushed. "Ma'am, it's not about subjective, it's standard procedure when we have an oversold situation. Show me the written policy." Jennifer's hands trembled as she tapped her tablet screen. "I don't have the specific policy document here, but my supervisor authorized this decision." "Your supervisor," Simone repeated. "Who would that be?" "Richard Caldwell, Regional Operations Manager. And Mr. Caldwell told you to prioritize Mr. Ashford over me specifically," he said. "Mr. Ashford is a high-value client who requires priority treatment." "Based on what criteria?" Jennifer's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like a fish drowning in air. That's when George Mitchell stood. His movement was slow, deliberate, carrying the weight of decades of executive presence. "Excuse me," he said, his voice cultured, authoritative. "I've been flying private aviation for 30 years. I've been a chairman of 3 Fortune 500 companies. And I have never in all that time seen someone removed from a confirmed seat without first reviewing their account credentials." He looked at Jennifer directly. "Young lady, have you actually checked this woman's booking status?" Jennifer's face went even redder. I saw the booking confirmation, but you didn't look at the account tier, the travel history, the VIP status indicators." Jennifer was silent. George turned to Blake. "And you, sir, are standing here claiming priority based on what your voice, your clothing, the size of your ego." Blake's smirk faltered slightly. "Look, old man, this doesn't concern you." George smiled coldly. "I'm George Mitchell. Perhaps you've heard of Mitchell Enterprises. We did $8 billion in revenue last year. I say that not to brag, but to establish that I understand the concept of value. And I'm telling you right now that value has nothing to do with how loud you are." Blake recovered quickly, puffing up his chest. "Well, I have connections. I'm an influencer. Bad reviews from me can damage a company's reputation. So, yeah, I deserve priority." Simone turned to Blake slowly. "So you're saying the company should prioritize passengers based on their ability to threaten negative publicity?" Blake grinned. Welcome to the real world, sweetheart. Reputation is everything. That's when Dr. Elena Torres stood, her phone still recording. Dr. Elena Torres, pediatric surgeon. I'm on my way to Aspen to perform emergency surgery on a child. My flight was also affected by this oversold situation. She looked at Jennifer. Why wasn't I asked to take a later flight? Jennifer stammered. You're a doctor. We couldn't. Couldn't what? Elena pressed. Couldn't delay critical medical care, or couldn't risk the bad publicity of bumping a surgeon. She gestured to Simone. This woman has been nothing but polite. She asked reasonable questions. She showed her ticket. And you decided she was expendable because she didn't fit your mental image of what important looks like. Blake rolled his eyes. Oh my God, here we go. Everything's about race now, right? Simone's eyes snapped to Blake. I never mentioned race, Mr. Ashford. You did. Blake backpedaled. I just mean, you people always make everything about... Finish that sentence, Simone interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. Please. I want everyone here to hear it. Blake stopped, mouth half open, finally realizing he was being recorded by multiple phones. Tiffany jumped in, trying to save the moment. Look, nobody's being racist. We just think there should be standards for who gets to fly in these spaces. Like a vibe check or something. The room went dead silent. Sophie Kim, who'd been watching from behind the espresso bar, set down her cleaning cloth. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear when she spoke. Ms. Martinez, she said, I saw the booking this morning when I was reviewing the manifest. S. Williams, Platinum VIP status. Frequent flyer with over 28 trips in the past year. Executive override codes in the system. Jennifer spun around. Sophie, you're out of line. No, Sophie said, her voice gaining strength. You're out of line. I've worked here for 3 years. I've watched you treat passengers differently based on how they look, what they wear, how they talk. I stayed quiet because I needed this job. She reached up and unpinned her name tag. But I can't do this anymore. I won't be part of humiliating someone who's done nothing wrong. She set the name tag on the counter. I quit. I'd rather lose my job than lose myself. The lounge erupted in murmurs. Other passengers began speaking up. I saw the whole thing, one man said. She asked polite questions. He, pointing at Blake, has been rude to every staff member since he arrived. A woman near the window added, I've flown Skylight for 5 years. If this is how you treat passengers, I'll take my business elsewhere. Jennifer looked around, panic rising in her chest. This was spiraling out of control. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed Richard Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell, she said, her voice cracking. We have a situation. You need to come to the lounge immediately. Blake, sensing the mood turning against him, decided to double down. You know what, I'm sick of this. You're not special. You're not important. You're just some... He stopped himself, but everyone knew what word he'd almost said. The silence was deafening. Simone looked at him with something like pity. Mr. Ashford, you've just crossed a line you can't uncross. She turned back to Jennifer. Ms. Martinez, you've had multiple opportunities to correct this. You chose not to. What would you have done in this moment? Would you have stayed silent or spoken up? Let us know in the comments below. The words hit Simone differently than they hit everyone else in the lounge, because Blake's casual cruelty, his reflexive dismissal, his absolute certainty that some people simply mattered more than others wasn't new to her. It was a song she'd heard her entire life, played in different keys, but always the same melody. As she prepared to make the call that would change everything, her mind slipped back. Not to escape, but to remember why this moment mattered. Columbia, South Carolina, 1989. Simone was 8 years old. The small regional airport smelled like floor wax and burned coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, unforgiving glare. Young Simone stood beside her mother, both of them dressed in their Sunday best. Navy blue dress with white collar for Simone, pressed and perfect. Her mother in a modest suit, hair done carefully, shoes polished until they gleamed. They were flying to Simone's grandmother's funeral in Atlanta. The tickets had taken 3 months of saving. Her mother worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night, working retail during the day. But family mattered. Saying goodbye mattered. The tickets were first class. Not because they were extravagant, but because those were the only seats available when they booked. Her mother had paid full price. No discount, no corporate account. Just hard-earned money exchanged for confirmed seats. But when they approached the gate, the agent, a white woman with frosted hair and thin lips, had looked at them with instant suspicion. "Are you sure these are your tickets?" "Yes, ma'am." Simone's mother had said, her voice tired but polite. "I booked them 3 weeks ago." The agent examined the tickets like they might be counterfeit. "These are for first class." "Yes, ma'am." "And you paid how much for these the full fare, ma'am?" $450 each. The agent's lips pressed into a tight line. "Well, there's been some kind of mistake. These seats are reserved for our premium passengers. I'm going to have to move you to the back of the plane. But I paid for—" "Ma'am, I don't know where you got these tickets, but I can't let you board until I verify." A white man in a business suit had walked up behind them, tapping his foot impatiently. "Excuse me," he'd said, his voice sharp with privilege. "Is there a problem here? Some of us have places to be." The agent had smiled at him instantly, warmly, like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Of course, sir. Right this way." Then, to Simone's mother without even looking at her. "Step aside, please. You're holding up the line." Young Simone had looked up at her mother, waiting for her to fight, to argue, to demand the seats they'd paid for. But her mother had just bowed her head, picked up their bags, and moved to the back of the line. They'd waited 20 minutes while the agent verified their tickets with 3 different supervisors. By the time they were allowed to board, first class was already seated. Every seat full, except 2. 2 empty seats, row 3, aisle and window. The seats they'd paid for. Sitting empty the entire flight because the agent had decided they didn't belong there. Simone and her mother sat in the last row by the bathrooms. The seats didn't recline. The smell of disinfectant was overwhelming. Through the gap in the curtain, young Simone could see those empty seats mocking her. "Mama," she'd whispered. "Why didn't you tell them?" Her mother had looked at her with eyes so tired they seemed ancient. Eyes that had seen this scene play out 1,000 times in 1,000 different places. "Baby," she'd said softly, "sometimes it don't matter what you say. They already decided who you are the second they looked at you. But that's not fair. No, baby, it's not." "Then what do we do?" Her mother had been quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at clouds that looked like cotton. Finally, she'd said, "You get strong. You get smart. And one day when you have the power, you make sure nobody ever does this to someone else." That promise had lived in Simone's bones for 37 years. In the decades since she'd faced variations of that moment again and again. At 24, questioned at check-in, forced to prove her ticket was really hers while white passengers breezed through. At 31, a lounge agent asking if she was traveling with someone, unable to believe she'd earned first class on her own. Each incident a small cut that never quite healed, each one adding to the weight she carried. But each one also adding to her resolve. Back to the present. Van Nuys Airport. Sterling Private Lounge. The memory dissolved like smoke. Simone blinked, returned to the moment, to Blake still waiting for her response, to Jennifer's trembling hands, to the witnesses with their phones raised. But she wasn't looking at them anymore. She was looking at Jennifer at the same calculation in her eyes that the agent in Colombia had held decades ago. The same unconscious dismissal. The same quiet certainty that some people belonged and others didn't. Her mother's voice echoed one final time. When you have the power, make sure nobody else feels what we're feeling. Well, Mama Simone thought, I got strong. I got smart, and now I have the power. She raised the phone to her ear, ready to use it. Simone's finger hovered over Luis Ramirez's name in her contacts. One tap. That's all it would take. But she paused. $4 million in immediate losses, 200 passengers affected, 51 aircraft grounded, staff jobs potentially at risk. Board members would question her judgment. Investors would panic. The media would dissect every decision. Her mother's voice. When you have the power, use it right. But was this right? Or was it just anger dressed up as principle? She looked at Jennifer crying softly behind the counter. A single mother who'd made a terrible choice but wasn't evil. At Blake smirking, certain of his invincibility, completely unaware of what he'd set in motion. At Sophie, who'd quit rather than participate, standing alone with her name tag on the counter. At the other passengers, some watching, some looking away, all of them complicit in their silence until someone gave them permission to speak. At Dr. Elena Torres, who had a child's life depending on her getting to Aspen. At George Mitchell, who'd spent 40 years staying silent and finally found his voice. This wasn't anger. This was clarity. Discrimination thrived in darkness, in the quiet acceptance of small injustices, in the belief that speaking up cost too much. Someone had to turn on the lights. Someone had to say the cost of silence was higher than the cost of action. And she was the someone with the power to do it. Simone tapped Luis's number. Luis, she said, her voice steady as steel. Initiate protocol terminus. Authorization code Harper 77 Omega. A pause on the other end. Simone, are you certain that's 51 aircraft? Over 200 passengers. Estimated $4 million in immediate losses. I'm certain, she replied without hesitation. Executing now, Luis said. Thank you, Luis. One more thing. Anything. Flag the names Blake Ashford, Tiffany Ashford, and Richard Caldwell for permanent service denial. Full database notification to partner carriers. Done. Do you need me on site? Not yet. But prepare termination packets for Richard Caldwell and Jennifer Martinez. I'll need them within the hour. Understood. Simone lowered her phone. The lounge was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system, a soft whisper that seemed to amplify the tension rather than ease it. Blake was still smirking, arms crossed, waiting for her to finish her little call. Tiffany had pulled out a compact mirror and was touching up her lip gloss, completely disinterested. Jennifer looked like she might be sick. Around the lounge, phones started buzzing. Push notifications lit up screens like fireflies. Skylight executive flights alert. All flights temporarily grounded. Details to follow. Blake pulled out his phone, staring at the screen. His smirk faltered. What the hell? My flight's been canceled. Tiffany looked at her phone. Mine too. This is insane. Other passengers checked their devices, murmuring in confusion and frustration. Simone turned to address the entire lounge, her voice calm, but carrying an authority that made everyone stop and listen. My name is Dr. Simone Harper. I am the founder and CEO of Apex Aviation Technologies. She paused, letting the name register. We develop avionics software and AI logistics systems for commercial and private aviation. Our technology is integrated into over 4,000 aircraft worldwide, including every Boeing 787 manufactured since 2019. We are the infrastructure backbone for approximately 70% of private aviation companies in North America. A few heads turned. Someone whispered something, but Blake's face remained confused. Never heard of you, he said dismissively. Simone nodded. I wouldn't expect you to have. I don't do much press. I prefer to let my work speak for itself." "Great," Blake said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "So, you're some random tech person. What does that have to do with—" 3 years ago, Simone continued, her voice cutting through his interruption like a blade, my company acquired Skylight Executive Flights. We rebranded it, restructured it, and built it into one of the premier private aviation services in the country. She took a step closer to Blake. "Which means the company you just demanded VIP treatment from, the company whose staff you just humiliated, the company whose seat you just tried to steal." She smiled, not warmly. "I own it." Jennifer's tablet slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor, screen cracking. Tiffany's compact mirror snapped shut, her surgically perfect mouth dropping open. George Mitchell closed his eyes briefly, exhaling in vindication. Dr. Elena Torres lowered her phone, whispering, "Oh my God." And Blake Ashford, for the first time in his adult life, felt the earth disappear beneath his feet. "Wait," he said, the word coming out strangled. You're lying." Simone didn't respond. She simply stood there, radiating a quiet power that needed no defense. Tiffany pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. She Googled Simone Harper, Apex Aviation. The screen flooded with results. Forbes profiles, TechCrunch articles, conference keynote speeches, board positions, awards, a photograph that matched the woman standing in front of her. She showed Blake the screen. Her hand was trembling. Blake's face went from flushed red to ashen white in seconds. His mouth worked trying to form words, but nothing came out except a strangled sound. "If I'd known," he finally managed. "If I'd known who you were." "Exactly." Simone interrupted, her voice like ice. "If you'd known who I was, you would have treated me differently." "That's the entire problem, Mr. Ashford." She looked around the lounge at all the witnesses, all the phones still recording. "I'm not angry that you didn't recognize me. I'm disappointed that basic human decency was conditional on my identity having value to you." Dr. Elena Torres spoke up. "I knew I recognized you. Medical Technology Conference in Boston 2022. You gave the keynote on AI-assisted navigation systems." She turned to Blake, her voice dripping with contempt. "She's worth more than everyone in this lounge combined, including you. Especially you." "Michael Grant." The journalist raised his phone higher. "Dr. Harper." "Michael Grant, investigative journalist. Can I ask you some questions?" "Not right now, Mr. Grant," Simone replied. "But I'll make time for you later. I think your story just got significantly bigger." George Mitchell stood, extended his hand. "George Mitchell, I should have spoken up sooner." Simone shook it. "You spoke when it mattered. Thank you." Sophie Kim, still standing by the espresso bar, her name tag lying on the counter, spoke up. "Ms. Harper, I'm so sorry. I should have said something earlier." Simone looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something important. "You quit rather than participate in humiliating a guest." That took courage, Sophie. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a business card. "Come see me after this is resolved. You'll have a position if you want one." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." But Blake wasn't done. He was a creature of impulse and ego, and those creatures make their worst decisions when cornered. "Okay, fine," he said, his voice rising, taking on an aggressive edge. "So you own the airline. Congratulations. But you grounded the entire fleet. That's insane. Do you have any idea how much money that costs? You're going to destroy your own company just to prove a point?" Simone turned to him slowly. "It's not about proving a point, Mr. Ashford. It's about establishing a standard." Blake laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "A standard? You mean virtue signaling? This is all performance. You're trying to look good for social media." Tiffany, sensing her husband digging himself deeper, tried to pull him back. "Blake, maybe we should just—" He shook her off. "No. I'm sick of this woke corporate nonsense. She's overreacting, making everything about race when it's just about business." "I never mentioned race," Simone said quietly. "You did, multiple times now, because that's what this is really about." Blake was shouting now, completely losing control. "You people always play the victim card, always crying discrimination when you don't get your way." The lounge gasped. Collective audible shock. George Mitchell stood up straighter, his face hardening. "Son, you need to stop talking. Right now." But Blake was past listening. The dam had broken. All the thoughts he usually kept carefully veiled were flooding out. "I have worked hard for everything I have." He jabbed a finger at Simone. "I didn't get handouts. I didn't play identity politics. I earned my success through merit." Simone's voice when she spoke was colder than ice. "And you think I didn't?" Blake sneered. "I think you probably sued your way into some settlements, played the discrimination card until companies paid you to go away. That's how it works, right?" Michael Grant's phone was recording every word. Elena Torres looked horrified. George Mitchell shook his head sadly. And Simone Harper, who had built a $3 billion company from nothing, who had coded through nights and negotiated with titans and proved herself in 1,000 rooms where she wasn't supposed to be, who had earned every single thing she'd ever achieved, felt something shift inside her. Not anger. Anger was too hot, too chaotic. This was something colder, more permanent. "Mr. Ashford," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow filling the entire space. "You've just revealed who you really are. Not in a moment of stress, not under pressure, but willingly, deliberately. You chose these words." She pulled out her phone again. "The consequences start now." Simone stood at the center of the Sterling Private Lounge, commanding attention without seeking it. Around her, passengers who moments ago had been uncomfortable witnesses were now active participants. Phones raised voices, finding courage. "For those of you who don't know me," Simone said, addressing the room directly, "let me properly introduce myself." She spoke without notes, without hesitation, with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every word. "My name is Dr. Simone Harper. I hold a Ph.D. in computer engineering from MIT, where I focused on aviation navigation systems. 20 years ago, I founded Apex Aviation Technologies in my garage with $11,000 in savings and a belief that I could make air travel safer and smarter." She paused, letting that sink in. "Today, Apex develops avionics software and AI logistics systems that are integrated into over 4,000 aircraft worldwide. Every Boeing 787 manufactured since 2019 runs our code. We handle navigation, weather prediction, fuel optimization, and emergency protocols for 70% of private aviation companies in North America." George Mitchell nodded, recognition dawning more fully. "I've heard presentations about your work. The AI weather prediction system that saved lives." Simone acknowledged him with a slight nod. 3 years ago, my company acquired Skyalite Executive Flights. We restructured it, modernized the fleet, and built it into what I hoped would be one of the premier private aviation services in the country." She looked at Jennifer, who had gone completely pale. "I booked today's flight under my mother's maiden name, S. Williams. I do this periodically, unannounced, to see how our company operates when ownership isn't watching. It's the only way to get an honest view of our culture." Her voice hardened slightly. "And today I discovered that bias is alive and thriving in my own company." Jennifer's knees buckled slightly. She grabbed the counter for support. Blake, still trying to salvage something. Anything blurted out. "Look, if I'd known you were the CEO." "That's the 3rd time you've said that," Simone interrupted. "And each time you prove my point." You believe respect should be reserved for people you recognize, people whose names carry weight, people who fit your definition of important. She turned to address the entire lounge again. I didn't reveal my identity immediately because I wanted to see exactly this. How systems respond when the person being judged can't defend themselves with credentials or connections, when they're just a passenger who paid for a seat and expects dignity. Dr. Elena Torres spoke up, her voice carrying professional authority. I was at your keynote in Boston. You talked about building systems that eliminate human error. You said the most dangerous failures aren't mechanical, they're cultural. Yes, Simone agreed. You can't code your way out of human bias, which is why I'm shutting down operations until we address it directly. A murmur went through the crowd. People checked their phones again, seeing the grounding notifications, the scramble for rebooking, the chaos spreading through the network. An older woman near the window spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. I've flown Skylight for 8 years. I've never seen anything like this. How many times, Simone asked gently, have you seen something like this happen to someone else and said nothing? The woman looked down, unable to answer. I'm not blaming you, Simone continued. Staying silent is human nature when speaking up feels risky. But that's exactly how cultures of discrimination survive, through good people's silence. Michael Grant, his journalist's instinct fully activated, spoke up. Dr. Harper, can you tell us what happens now? You've grounded your fleet. You've exposed the issue. What's next? Now, Simone said, we rebuild, not just policies and procedures, but the fundamental culture of how we see passengers, how we train staff, how we define value. She pulled her tablet from her bag, tapped the screen, brought up a document. I've been drafting these reforms for 2 years, waiting to see if they'd be necessary. Today proved they are. She read from the screen. Mandatory unconscious bias training for every employee, every level, no exceptions. A guest experience council with authority to override any manager. Clear algorithm-based priority metrics that eliminate subjective judgment. A zero-tolerance policy for discrimination with transparent enforcement, and a passenger bill of rights posted in every lounge. Sophie Kim, still standing by the counter, wiped tears from her eyes. That's what we needed. What I needed. Simone looked at her. You spoke up when it cost you something. That's leadership. I meant what I said about a position. She turned back to Jennifer. Ms. Martinez, you enabled this. You made assumptions based on appearance. You dismissed my questions. You called your supervisor instead of checking your own systems. Jennifer was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. I didn't think. You didn't think I deserved the same courtesy you'd give someone who looked important to you? Simone finished. And that's exactly the problem. The lounge doors burst open. Richard Caldwell, Regional Operations Manager, strode in. 52 years old, expensive suit, corporate authority radiating from every pore. His face was red, voice already raised before he fully entered. What in God's name is going on here? Why is my entire fleet grounded? He spotted Jennifer first. Martinez, explain yourself. Jennifer tried to speak, but only managed a strangled sob. Richard pulled out his phone, checking the crisis notifications flooding his screen. 51 aircraft grounded. Hundreds of passengers affected. Millions in losses. His career potentially ending in real time. He looked around the lounge, taking in the scene. Passengers with phones raised. A woman crying behind the counter. Blake Ashford, the VIP client he'd personally told Jennifer to prioritize, looking shell-shocked. And in the center of it all, a black woman in simple clothes holding a tablet, radiating quiet power. Richard didn't recognize her. Didn't see the CEO who signed his paychecks. Didn't understand that the woman he was about to dismiss was the person who could fire him with a single word. He made the same mistake everyone else had made. He looked at her and decided she didn't matter. "Ma'am, I apologize for whatever inconvenience you've experienced," he said dismissively. "I'm sure we can resolve this with appropriate compensation. But you need to vacate the lounge now. We have actual priority passengers who need this space." A collective gasp went through the room. Blake Ashford, mired in his own disaster, actually winced at Richard's tone. And George Mitchell stood once more, his voice carrying decades of boardroom authority. "Young man, do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" The reckoning had only just begun. Richard turned to George, irritated. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but this is a company matter. I'm handling it." "You're not handling anything," George said quietly. "You're making it exponentially worse." Richard's face flushed deeper. "With all due respect, I've been managing this region for 8 years. I know how to handle situations." Multiple passengers shouted at once. "She owns the airline? That's Dr. Simone Harper. She's your boss." Richard blinked, the words not quite computing. "What?" Jennifer, still crying, managed to speak through her tears. "Mr. Caldwell, she's the CEO. She owns the company. She grounded the fleet." Richard's face went through a remarkable transformation. Red to white to gray to a sick yellow. His mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. "Dr. Harper," he said weakly, "but you weren't supposed to—" "Wasn't supposed to? What?" Simone asked, her voice deadly calm. "Travel on my own airline. Book a flight under a different name to see how my staff actually treats passengers." She took a step toward him. He took a step back. "You just told the owner of this company to vacate the premises. You dismissed a paying passenger without even asking what happened. You assumed that I was the problem?" She pulled out her phone, opened her email, turned the screen toward him. "Here's your email from this morning, Richard. The one where you told Jennifer to prioritize Blake Ashford because he's influential on social media and has threatened negative reviews if he doesn't get special treatment." Richard's eyes went wide as he saw his own words on her screen. "You taught your staff that power comes from threats, that noise matters more than dignity, that managing reputation is more important than providing actual service." But Mr. Ashford is a high-value client," Richard stammered, grasping for any justification. "Show me his account," Simone said. Richard hesitated, then pulled out his tablet with shaking hands. He navigated to Blake's passenger profile, and Simone read it aloud for everyone to hear. "Blake Ashford. Total flights with Skylight in the past year 6. Total amount spent $47,000. Status tier silver. No executive clearances. 2 complaints filed against him for rude behavior toward staff." She swiped to her own profile, still under S. Williams. "Sarah Williams. Total flights 28. Total spent $340,000. Status Platinum VIP with executive override clearance. 0 complaints. Multiple commendations from staff." She looked at Richard directly. "You prioritized a passenger who's flown with us 6 times and has active complaints over someone who's flown 28 times with perfect standing. Explain the business logic." Richard's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Dr. Elena Torres stepped forward. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm flying to Aspen for emergency surgery on a child with a brain tumor. Because of this situation, I'm delayed. That delay could cost a little girl her life." She pointed at Jennifer. "Your employee tried to bump Dr. Harper to accommodate a man who spent a fraction of what she has, all because of how they looked. And when questioned, you endorsed that decision." Richard turned to her desperately. "Doctor, I'll arrange special transport immediately. Whatever you need." Elena cut him off. "What I need is for you to fix the culture that created this situation." Richard looked around at the crowd of witnesses, the phones recording every word, the viral videos already spreading online. His career, his reputation, his carefully constructed authority, all of it crumbling in real time. "Dr. Harper," he said, his voice breaking. "If I'd known you were testing the system, I would have—" "That's exactly the problem," Simone interrupted. I shouldn't have to be the CEO for your staff to treat me with respect. Every passenger who walks through that door deserves the same baseline dignity. The lounge doors opened again. A woman in a sharp business suit entered, carrying a leather folder. Amanda Price, VP of Operations, 55 years old, no-nonsense expression. Dr. Harper, she said, her voice professional but tinged with distress. I came as soon as Luis called. I have the documentation you requested. She glanced at Richard and something like sadness crossed her face. I'm sorry, Richard, but you were warned. Multiple times. Richard stared at her in shock. You knew about the complaints I forwarded 3 to you personally, Amanda said, all involving passengers of color being treated differently than comparable white passengers. You dismissed every single one as misunderstandings. She turned to Simone. I failed you, Dr. Harper. I hired him. I set expectations that allowed this. I take responsibility. Simone studied her for a long moment. Amanda, you're not fired. You're being reassigned. I need you to lead the reform, build the new training, rewrite the policies. Because you know where the gaps are. Amanda's eyes widened. You're trusting me with this. You acknowledged failure without making excuses, Simone said. That's the first step toward fixing it. She turned back to Richard and Jennifer. Your employment with Skylight is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. Jennifer collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Richard, his face a mask of devastation, tried one last time. Dr. Harper, I'm begging you. No, Simone said simply. The time for begging was when you had the power and chose to use it to protect the wrong people. 2 security officers entered the lounge. They stood beside Richard and Jennifer, waiting. Blake Ashford, watching his own role in this disaster finally sink in, realized that the consequences were just beginning. Have you ever witnessed something like this at your workplace? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments. As security escorted Richard and Jennifer toward the exit, the lounge transformed from a space of tension to something else entirely. Not relief exactly. More like collective awakening. The kind that happens when people who've been silent realize they don't have to be anymore. Richard walked past Blake without looking at him, his career ending in the same lounge where he'd enabled so much casual cruelty. Jennifer's sobs echoed against the marble until the doors closed behind them with soft finality. Blake stood frozen, his phone clutched in his hand, watching his social media implode in real time. Comments flooding in, followers dropping by the hundreds, brand partnerships sending urgent emails. We need to talk, Tiffany tugged at his sleeve desperately. Blake, we need to leave. Now. But Blake couldn't move. He was watching something he'd never experienced before consequence. Dr. Elena Torres approached Simone directly, her face showing both anger and respect. Dr. Harper, my patient in Aspen, can you help Simone? Pulled out her phone immediately. Amanda, I need a medical charter in the air within 20 minutes. Route to Aspen. Priority clearance, full medical equipment. Bill it to my personal account. Amanda's voice came through the speaker. Already on it. Jet will be ready in 18 minutes. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Simone shook her head. I'm the reason you're delayed. The least I can do is get you there. The 2 women looked at each other with understanding. Both professionals. Both black women who'd had to prove themselves 1,000 times over. Both refusing to let the world make them small. Elena squeezed Simone's hand briefly, then hurried toward the exit. George Mitchell approached next, extending his hand formally. Dr. Harper. George Mitchell. I should have spoken up sooner, before it escalated. Simone shook his hand. You spoke when it mattered. That's what counts. I've been in rooms like this my whole career, George said quietly. I've watched people make the calculation you described, appearance over substance, Volume over value. I've stayed silent more times than I'm proud of. Why didn't you? Simone asked, genuinely curious. George's face softened with something like shame, fear of being uncomfortable, fear of making a scene, fear of being labeled difficult or oversensitive. He looked around the lounge at the other passengers, many of whom were nodding. But I'm 72 years old. I've spent 40 years building companies, making money, accumulating power. And what good is any of it if I can't use it to stand up when someone's being hurt? Simone nodded. That's the question everyone should ask themselves. Michael Grant. The journalist approached with his phone still recording. Dr. Harper, this story needs to be told. Not just what happened today, but the larger pattern it reveals. Simone considered him carefully. What publication? Independent. I do long-form investigative work. I've covered corporate discrimination before. Then yes, Simone said. I'll give you full access. Interview anyone you want. I have nothing to hide, even if it makes your company look bad, especially if it makes my company look bad. Because the only way to fix a problem is to acknowledge it exists. Michael lowered his phone, respect clear in his eyes. Most CEOs would have their PR team bury this. I'm not most CEOs. Sophie Kim, who'd been standing silently near the espresso bar, finally approached. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was steady. Ms. Harper, I meant what I said. I quit. I can't work in a place that treats people like this. Simone smiled gently. What if the place changes? Sophie blinked. What? I'm offering you a position. Director of Guest Experience. You'll build the new training program. You'll have authority to override any manager if you see discrimination. You'll report directly to me. Sophie's mouth fell open. But I'm 26. I've only been in the industry 3 years. I'm nobody. You quit rather than participate in injustice, Simone interrupted. That makes you exactly who I need. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Then help me make sure this never happens again. Sophie nodded, unable to speak. Around the lounge, other passengers began sharing their stories. Tentatively at first, then, with growing momentum, a black businessman in his 50s spoke up. This happened to me in Dallas 2 years ago. Different airline. Same pattern. They questioned my ticket, said it looked fraudulent, made me wait while they verified. 3 white passengers checked in with no problems. A young Hispanic woman added, I was traveling with my grandmother. They spoke to me in slow, loud English, even though we were speaking perfect English to each other. Then they tried to seat us separately, even though we had confirmed seats together. An older Asian man said, I've been questioned about my luggage so many times I've stopped counting. Is this yours? How did you afford this? Where are you really from? One by one, the stories emerged. Each one a small wound, each one a moment of quiet humiliation that its victim had carried alone. Until now. Simone listened to every single story, took notes, asked questions, validated experiences. This is why I grounded the fleet, she said when the stories finally slowed. Because these aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a larger problem, and you can't fix what you don't measure. You can't measure what you don't witness. A woman near the window, elderly and well-dressed, spoke up quietly. I've flown Skylight for 12 years. I've seen these things happen. I never said anything. I'm ashamed of that. Don't be ashamed, Simone said gently. Be different going forward. That's all any of us can do. She looked around at all the faces, all the witnesses, all the people who'd been silent until given permission to speak. You're not responsible for what you didn't see before. But now you've seen it. Now you know. What you do next, that's what matters. The mood in the lounge had shifted completely. What started as confrontation had become something else. Community. Solidarity. The beginning of change. Blake Ashford, still standing in the corner with Tiffany, finally found his voice. "This is ridiculous. You're all overreacting. I just wanted a seat. That's not a crime." Every head turned toward him. The judgment in the air was palpable. George Mitchell approached Blake directly, his voice quiet but firm. "Young man, I'm going to give you advice you won't take, but should. Apologize. Publicly. Sincerely. Not because it'll fix this, but because it's right." Blake sneered. "I'm not apologizing to her." "Then you've learned nothing," George said sadly. "And you deserve everything that's coming." Security approached Blake and Tiffany. "Sir, ma'am, you need to vacate the premises. Your membership has been terminated. You're now trespassing." Blake's face went red. "We paid for this lounge access. Your membership contract includes a clause allowing termination for abusive behavior. Security held up a tablet showing the contract. You violated it. Multiple times. On camera." Blake looked around desperately for support. Found none. Even Tiffany had stopped defending him. Her face crumpled with the realization that her influencer career was over. As they walked toward the exit, Blake's phone buzzed continuously, and the digital world which had built him up was tearing him down with equal speed. We're about to jump forward 3 months to see what happens next. But before we do, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the transformation is just beginning and you won't want to miss what comes next. Blake and Tiffany Ashford stepped out of the Sterling private lounge into harsh sunlight that felt like judgment. The automatic doors sealed behind them with a soft hiss that sounded like finality. For a moment, they just stood there on the curb, displaced, disoriented, the ground beneath their carefully constructed reality having completely vanished. Blake's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Each notification, another small death. Instagram notification, @CryptoBlake, has been mentioned 847 times in the last 15 minutes. He opened the app with trembling fingers. His feed was a wasteland. The first post, he saw a clip from Dr. Elena's video, him looming over Simone, the sneer on his face, the entitlement dripping from every word. Caption: "Watch privilege meet consequence in real time." 4.2 million views in 15 minutes. Comments rolled in like a flood. "Bro really thought he was special because he has money. This is what entitlement looks like when reality checks it. Just watch this man destroy his entire life because he couldn't show basic respect. The CEO reveal is chef's kiss." Blake scrolled, his stomach dropping with each swipe. A notification popped up. "Fashion Nova has removed your tag from 47 posts." Another. "Your invitation to speak at CryptoCon 2025 has been revoked." Another. "Tiffany Ashford has changed her relationship status to it's complicated." He looked at Tiffany. She was staring at her own phone, mascara running down her surgically perfect cheeks in dark streaks. "My followers," she whispered. "Blake, my followers." She turned her screen to show him. The number was dropping in real time, visibly, like a stock market crash you could watch happen. 247,000 when she'd woken up that morning. 203,000 when they'd left the lounge. Now 187,000. Refresh. 183,000. Refresh. 179,000. The numerical representation of her entire professional identity evaporating before her eyes. Blake's phone rang. His business partner. He stared at it, handshaking, then answered. "Blake, what the hell did you do?" The voice was panicked, angry. "I'm watching you trend on Twitter. Our investors are pulling out. The fund is done. Done. Don't call me again." The line went dead. Blake tried to call back. Blocked. Email notification. "Your lease termination notice has been delivered." Per our conversation with other tenants regarding recent public behavior, we are exercising our right to terminate your month-to-month agreement. You have 30 days to vacate. Another email. Your Chase Sapphire Reserve Card payment is 45 days overdue. Your account will be sent to collections if payment is not received within 72 hours. Wait, what? Blake hadn't missed any payments. He opened his banking app. Crypto wallet value, which had been $8.4 million last week, $3.2 million. A separate crash he hadn't been paying attention to, some regulation news, some market panic, and now his automatic payment systems were failing because his liquidity had evaporated. Another notification. Your reservation at Nobu Malibu for tonight has been canceled per management decision. Another, your membership at Equinox West Hollywood has been suspended pending investigation of conduct violations reported by other members. Another, at Blake Ashford, your YouTube channel has been demonetized due to multiple community guideline violations reported in the past hour. The world he'd built on volume and visibility was collapsing with the same speed it had risen. Tiffany grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his skin. We need to fix this. Post an apology. Do something. Blake tried to compose a statement, fingers fumbling on his phone screen. I want to apologize to anyone who was offended by my words at Van Nuys Airport today. I didn't mean to cause harm. I was having a stressful day and said things I regret. I'm committed to learning and growing from this experience. He posted it to Instagram. The response was immediate and brutal. Apologizing for being caught, not for the behavior. Anyone who was offended, LOL, you're still not getting it. This is what hollow looks like. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry there were consequences. Within 3 minutes, the apology post had 12,000 comments, 98% negative. Blake's phone buzzed again. Text from his mother. Blake, honey, what is happening? Your aunt just sent me a video. Please call me. Please. He stared at the text. Couldn't answer. Couldn't explain. Couldn't face her voice asking, what did you do? Tiffany's phone rang. Her agent. This is... The agent's voice was flat, professional, emotionless. I'm dropping you as a client, effective immediately. Best of luck. Click. Another call. Her landlord. Ms. Ashford, I need to discuss your lease. Several tenants have expressed concerns about recent events becoming public. We need to talk about your continued residency. Tiffany hung up without responding. Blake tried to call an Uber. The app showed cars available, but when he requested one, it kept getting canceled. One driver. Another driver. A third. Was he flagged in their system somehow? Or were drivers Googling his name? He tried Lyft. Same result. They were stuck, stranded at an airport curb with no way home and no one willing to help them. A town car pulled up. The driver rolled down the window. You need a ride. Blake nearly wept with relief. Yes. Yes, please. West Hollywood. That'll be $400. Cash only. Blake blinked. What? That's insane. Surge pricing, the driver said with a slight smile that suggested he knew exactly who Blake was. Take it or leave it. Blake pulled out his wallet. He had $70 in cash. His cards were maxed or frozen. His crypto was inaccessible without a computer. I don't have $400 in cash. Then you don't have a ride. The driver rolled up his window and drove away. Blake and Tiffany stood on the curb in the Los Angeles sun, surrounded by their designer luggage with nowhere to go and no way to get there. Through the lounge windows, they could see Simone Harper talking with other passengers. Calm, composed, completely in control. The woman they'd dismissed as nobody. The woman who owned everything. Blake's phone buzzed one more time. Google alert. Blake Ashford now has 47 news articles published in the past hour. He clicked the top result. Headline: Entitled Crypto Influencer Gets Reality Check After Insulting Airline CEO. Subheading: Dr. Simone Harper grounds entire fleet after witnessing discrimination firsthand. The article had embedded video. The full interaction, every word, every sneer, every moment of his absolute certainty that he mattered more than anyone else in that room. 9 million views. And climbing. In 30 minutes, Blake Ashford had gone from confident influencer to cautionary tale. Not because of cancel culture or mob justice or any of the excuses his mind was frantically generating, but because he'd revealed his character in 4K video with perfect audio. And character, it turns out, has consequences. Back in the Sterling private lounge with Blake and Tiffany gone, Richard and Jennifer terminated, and the immediate crisis addressed the human cost of Simone's decision became visible. Amanda Price stood at the center of the lounge with a tablet and a team of 3 staff members working through the rebooking process. Her voice was calm but urgent as she coordinated with every available resource. Simone stood beside her, refusing to delegate this part. If she'd caused the disruption, she'd help fix it. Dr. Torres Simone said, addressing Elena directly, "Your medical charter is fueled and ready. Captain Rodriguez is waiting for you. Flight time, 92 minutes to Aspen." Elena grabbed her bag. "Thank you. Truly. When you save that child's life," Simone said, "send me a message. No charge for the flight. That's payment enough." They embraced briefly, 2 women who understood exactly what it meant to be underestimated and exactly what it took to rise above it. George Mitchell approached next. "I'm supposed to be in Aspen for my granddaughter's wedding tomorrow morning." "You'll be there," Simone promised. Amanda checked her tablet. "Mr. Mitchell, we have you on a partner airline NetJets departing in 90 minutes, first class. We're covering the difference in cost plus a $5,000 travel credit for the inconvenience." George smiled. "The credit's unnecessary, but I appreciate the gesture. What you did today took real courage." Around the lounge, other passengers were being accommodated one by one. A business executive who needed to reach San Francisco for a board meeting rebooked on a partner airline upgraded departure in 70 minutes. A couple celebrating their anniversary given a complimentary night at a luxury hotel and rebooked on the first available flight tomorrow morning with full refund and upgrade. An elderly couple who'd been anxious about the disruption personally escorted to a quiet area, given refreshments, reassured that their vacation wouldn't be impacted. Each passenger handled individually, each concern addressed, each inconvenience acknowledged and compensated. Sophie Kim, still in the lounge, watched how Simone and Amanda worked, not with corporate efficiency, but with genuine care. This was the culture she wanted to be part of. "Ms. Harper," Sophie said, "about that position you offered." Simone turned to her. "Have you changed your mind?" "No," Sophie said firmly. "I want it. I want to help build something better." "Then you start Monday," Simone said. "Report directly to Amanda for training. Your first project reviewing every passenger complaint from the past 2 years that was dismissed without investigation." Sophie's eyes widened. "That's going to uncover a lot of problems." "Good," Simone said. "That's exactly the point." Michael Grant, still documenting everything, approached with his phone lowered. "Dr. Harper, I've recorded everything. With your permission, I'd like to write this story for long-form publication." "You have my permission," Simone said. "Full access. Interview anyone. I have one condition." Michael waited. "Tell the whole story. Not just what happened today, but why it matters. The pattern, the history, the cost of staying silent." Michael nodded. "That's exactly what I intend to do." By the time the rebooking process was complete, 4 hours after protocol terminus had been initiated, every single passenger had been accommodated. Some flew that day on partner airlines. Some rebooked for the next morning with premium upgrades. Some chose refunds and found their own arrangements, but every single one left with the same understanding what they'd witnessed mattered. Their stories mattered, and silence was no longer an option. Luis's voice came through Simone's phone, which she'd left on speaker. "Simone, the fleet's coming back online. We're cleared for operations to resume." "Thank you," Luis Simone said. "One more thing. Anything. Schedule an all-staff meeting, virtual and in person, tomorrow morning. Everyone. It's done." Simone ended the call and looked at Amanda. "Tomorrow we start rebuilding." "Tomorrow," Amanda agreed. "But today you changed everything." Simone closed her eyes, exhausted, but satisfied. "No," she said quietly. "Today I just refuse to accept what everyone said was normal. And sometimes that's exactly what change looks like." 24 hours later, the real work began. The conference room at Skylight headquarters in downtown Los Angeles was packed beyond capacity. Staff members lined the walls. The overflow filled 2 adjacent rooms with video feeds. Over 300 employees on remote video call their faces filling screens along one entire wall. Simone Harper stood at the head of the table, flanked by Luis Ramirez and Amanda Price. She wore another simple outfit, navy slacks, white button-down, no jewelry. Deliberate. Sending a message. The room was silent except for the hum of air conditioning and nervous breathing. "Thank you for being here." Simone began, her voice calm but carrying weight. "I know many of you are confused about what happened yesterday. Some of you are angry, some of you are scared. Let me address all of that directly." She clicked a remote. The screens filled with video footage from Dr. Elena Torres's phone. The full interaction, Jennifer's dismissal, Blake's looming presence, Richard's entrance and immediate assumption. The whole devastating sequence. Staff members watched in growing discomfort. Some looked down, some shook their heads. A few quietly wiped their eyes. When the video ended, Simone spoke again. "This isn't about blame. This is about accountability. Richard Caldwell and Jennifer Martinez are no longer with this company, but they didn't create this culture alone." She paused, letting that sink in. "Every time we overlooked a complaint because it seemed minor, every time we prioritized someone based on volume rather than value, every time we trained staff to judge passengers by appearance instead of account status, we built the foundation for what you just watched." A young staff member in the second row raised her hand tentatively. "Dr. Harper." "Are we all being fired?" "No," Simone said firmly. "You're being given a choice. Stay and help rebuild this company into what it should be, or leave if you can't commit to that change." Amanda Price stood pulling up a document on the screens. "These are the new policies effective immediately." The first slide appeared unconscious bias training mandatory for all staff. "Every employee, every level. No exceptions," Amanda said. "Led by external consultants who specialize in this work. Quarterly refreshers. Results tied to performance reviews and promotion eligibility." Second slide. Guest Experience Council. "Sophie Kim has been promoted to Director of Guest Experience," Amanda continued. "She'll lead a council that includes diverse passengers and staff members. They have direct authority to override any manager's decision if they observe discriminatory behavior." Sophie, sitting in the front row, felt every eye turned to her. She sat up straighter. Third slide. Clear priority metrics. "No more subjective VIP determinations," Amanda said. "Our new system is algorithm-based. Flight frequency, total spend loyalty years. Appearance, dress code, demeanor, 0 weight. These criteria will be public posted in every lounge." Luis Ramirez spoke up. "We're also implementing transparent complaint tracking. Every complaint will be logged in a system that I personally review weekly. No more buried reports. No more dismissed concerns." Fourth slide. "Zero tolerance enforcement. Any discrimination complaint will trigger immediate investigation," Amanda said. Findings will be public with anonymized details. Violations result in termination. No appeals based on seniority. No second chances. A middle-aged man in the back raised his hand. His name tag read, Operations Supervisor. That seems harsh. What if it's a misunderstanding? Then the investigation will show that Amanda replied. But we're done giving benefit of the doubt to people in power while denying it to passengers who deserve dignity. Simone took control again. I want to be very clear about something. These changes aren't negotiable. This isn't a discussion. This is the new standard. She looked around the room, meeting eyes directly. If you can't commit to equal treatment of every passenger, regardless of how they look, sound, or present themselves, then Skylight isn't the right place for you. And I mean that sincerely, not as a threat, but as clarity. A woman near the window spoke up, her voice shaking. Dr. Harper, I've worked here for 6 years. I love this company, but I'm scared that I've made mistakes like this without realizing it. Simone's expression softened. Then you're exactly who this training is for. Unconscious bias is called unconscious for a reason. We all have it. The question is whether we're willing to see it and change it. Luis added, We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for commitment to growth. An older staff member, someone who'd been with the company since its founding, stood up. Dr. Harper, I want to say something. The room turned to him. I saw what happened with Richard and Jennifer, and I'm ashamed to say I've seen similar things happen before and said nothing. I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that management knew what they were doing. His voice cracked slightly. I was wrong. I enabled this by staying silent. And I'm sorry. Simone nodded. Thank you for saying that. That's courage. She addressed the room again. Change doesn't happen through one training session or one policy document. It happens when people at every level decide they're done accepting the unacceptable. Sophie Kim stood, her voice clear and confident. I quit yesterday because I couldn't be part of something that contradicted my values. But Dr. Harper gave me a chance to be part of building something better. That's what we're all being offered right now. She looked around at her colleagues. We can resist this and hold on to how things were, or we can lean into it and become the company we should have been all along. Amanda pulled up the final slide, Passenger Bill of Rights. This will be posted in every lounge, every gate, every aircraft, she said. Right to dignified treatment, right to appeal any decision, right to speak to management, right to be heard. And at the bottom, Simone added a QR code that links directly to an anonymous complaint form that comes straight to my personal email. A murmur went through the room. You're opening yourself up to constant complaints, a manager said. Good, Simone replied. I want to know when we fail. That's the only way we'll improve. The meeting continued for another hour. Questions asked, concerns addressed, fears named and validated. By the end, the room's energy had shifted from defensive to determined. As people filed out, many stopped to speak to Simone personally. Some apologized. Some thanked her. Some just nodded with understanding. When the room finally emptied, except for Simone, Louise, and Amanda, the three of them sat in exhausted silence. That went better than I expected, Louise finally said. It's just the beginning, Simone replied. Words are easy. Behavior change is hard. But you gave them a reason to try, Amanda said. You showed them that accountability is real. Simone stood gathering her things. Tomorrow, we start training. And we don't stop until every person in this company understands that dignity isn't negotiable. 3 months after the incident that would become known internally as the Van Nuys Reckoning, Simone Harper returned to the Sterling private lounge. She dressed the same way she had that day. Simple charcoal pants, burgundy sweater, comfortable flats. No logos, no jewelry. Carrying the same worn Toni Morrison novel. Another unannounced audit. Another test. The moment she walked through the doors, everything felt different. The physical space was unchanged. Same marble floors, same recessed lighting, same espresso bar. But the atmosphere had transformed completely. Ms. Harper, a young staff member, approached immediately, his smile genuine and warm. "Welcome back. Your flight to Aspen is on time. Gate 7. Can I get you anything while you wait?" He didn't hesitate, didn't do a double take, didn't question her presence. Just pure professional hospitality. "No, thank you," Simone said. "But I appreciate you asking." She settled into a chair, the same chair where it had all started, and watched. A Hispanic family with 2 small children entered the lounge. The parents looked nervous, clearly first-time private flyers. The children wide-eyed at the elegant space. A staff member, Maria Gonzalez, according to her name tag, approached them immediately. "Welcome to Skylight. Is this your first time flying with us?" "Yes," the mother said. "We're not sure we're in the right place." "You absolutely are," Maria said warmly. "Let me show you around." She guided them to the family seating area, pointed out the refreshments, explained where the restrooms were. Not condescending, not performative, just genuine kindness. Simone watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. An older black man in a business suit entered, checking his ticket uncertainly. Another staff member, this one named David Kim, approached immediately. "Sir, can I help you find your gate?" "Gate 9, the man said. "But I wanted to check my boarding pass. I've had issues before with—" He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable finishing the sentence. David looked at the pass, checked his tablet. "You're all confirmed, sir. Executive status. Would you like me to notify the gate that you're here so they hold the flight if you need extra time?" The man's shoulders relaxed visibly. "Thank you. That's very kind." "Of course. And if you need anything, I'm David. Just wave me down." The man sat down with visible relief. Simone noticed his hands were shaking slightly. She understood. The trauma of repeated dismissals doesn't disappear overnight. Sophie Kim, now wearing a name tag that read Director of Guest Experience, moved through the lounge with quiet confidence. She paused at each seating area, checking in with passengers, addressing concerns before they became problems. She noticed Simone and approached with a warm smile. "Ms. Harper, I didn't know you were coming today." "That's the point," Simone said with a slight smile. "How's the new role?" challenging Sophie admitted. "But meaningful. We've processed 43 complaints in 3 months. Every single one investigated. 8 staff members received additional training. 2 were let go for refusing to change. And the culture—" Sophie's smile widened. "Different. Completely different. Staff feel empowered to speak up. Passengers feel heard. The training's working. Show me the data later," Simone said. "But right now, just tell me if someone walked in here dressed exactly like I am, would they be treated the same as someone in a designer suit?" "Without question," Sophie said firmly. "And if they weren't, I'd know about it within the hour." Simone nodded, satisfied. A well-dressed white couple entered the lounge, clearly wealthy, clearly used to premium treatment. The woman immediately began making demands. Better champagne selection, faster Wi-Fi, a quieter seating area. The staff member handled it professionally, but didn't scramble to accommodate unreasonable requests. Instead, he calmly explained what was available, offered alternatives, and maintained boundaries. The couple, accustomed to instant compliance, looked surprised, but ultimately accepted the boundaries without escalation. 6 months ago, Simone thought that would have gone differently. Her phone buzzed. Email from Dr. Elena Torres. Subject: "Thank you, plus an update." Simone opened it, smiling as she read. "Dear Simone, I wanted to update you on the little girl I flew to Aspen to treat. Her name is Isabella. She's 10 years old now. The surgery was successful and she's in full remission. She starts 5th grade next month. Her mother asked me to tell you that your kindness in getting me there on time meant her daughter got to live. Thank you for that. Also, I flew Skylight again last week. The difference is remarkable. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Keep going. Elena Simone closed her eyes briefly, emotion tightening her throat. This was why. Luis Ramirez appeared in the lounge, spotting Simone and approaching with a tablet. I thought I might find you here. How's it looking? Different, Simone said simply. Better. Luis sat down beside her. The data backs that up. Passenger complaints down 87%. Staff satisfaction up 63%. Customer retention at an all-time high. And bookings are up 22%. He pulled up a graph showing the trajectory. Turns out treating people with dignity is good business. It shouldn't be surprising, Simone said. But somehow it always is. There's more, Luis continued. 5 other private aviation companies have reached out asking about our training program. They want to implement similar policies. Simone raised an eyebrow. Are we sharing? I think we should. This shouldn't be competitive advantage. This should be industry standard. Agreed. Set up the meetings. Amanda Price entered the lounge, spotting them and joining. I see you're doing another surprise inspection. Always, Simone said. Trust, but verify. Well, the numbers don't lie. We've become the reference point for how private aviation should operate. Multiple industry publications have written features. She pulled up an article on her tablet, Skylight's Cultural Revolution, a Case Study in Accountability. Your story's becoming required reading in business schools, Amanda added. Good, Simone said. Maybe the next generation will build better from the start instead of having to tear down and rebuild. One more thing, Luis said. You asked me to track Blake Ashford's attempts to book flights. Simone's interest sharpened. And 32 attempts across 8 different carriers in 3 months. Everyone denied. The flag in the system is working. He's effectively grounded. Permanently, Simone asked. Until he demonstrates genuine behavior change through documented evidence. The system allows for appeals after 1 year with proof of remediation. So there's a path back, Simone said, but it requires actual change, not just waiting it out. Exactly. Simone stood preparing to board her flight. This is what justice looks like. Not revenge, not destruction, just consequence. And the opportunity for growth if someone's willing to do the work. As she walked toward her gate, she paused to look back at the lounge one more time. The families, the business travelers, the elderly couples, the young professionals, all moving through the space with ease and dignity. This was what she'd built, not just an airline, not just a company, but a space where appearance didn't determine treatment, where quiet dignity was valued as much as loud demands, where everyone, regardless of who they were or what they looked like, could expect respect. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory one last time. Get strong, baby. Get smart. And when you have the power, make sure nobody else feels what we're feeling. Mission accomplished, Mama Simone thought. Mission accomplished. If you've made it this far in the story, you're part of something bigger. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Your share could be the encouragement someone needs today. 3 months after the incident, Blake Ashford sat alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Culver City, a significant downgrade from the luxury penthouse in West Hollywood he'd been forced to vacate when his crypto fund collapsed. His phone, which used to buzz constantly with notifications, opportunities, and validation, now sat silent on his cheap IKEA coffee table. He opened his laptop and navigated to his LinkedIn profile. Employment status. Seeking opportunities. Last position. Independent crypto consultant. The euphemism was transparent. His Instagram account, once his primary source of income and identity, showed 47,000 followers, down from 247,000. The remaining followers were mostly bots and people who'd forgotten to unfollow. He'd tried to rebuild. Posted an apology video 2 weeks after the incident. It had been poorly received. The comments had been brutal, apologizing for being caught, not for the behavior. "You're only sorry you got consequences. This is what hollow looks like." He'd tried to get verified on Twitter again after his blue check was removed. Denied. Reason: violation of platform's behavior guidelines. He'd tried to book speaking engagements at crypto conferences. His agent had stopped returning calls. He'd tried to launch a new investment fund. Not a single investor committed. Every door he approached found a way to close before he reached it. That morning, he'd received an email from a warehouse logistics company where he'd applied for a coordinator position. The position paid $52,000 annually, a 95% reduction from his previous income. But he'd been desperate enough to apply anyway. "Dear Mr. Ashford, thank you for your interest in the warehouse coordinator position. Unfortunately, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. We wish you the best in your job search." What they didn't say. Their biggest client was a subsidiary of Apex Aviation Technologies. The background check had flagged his name automatically, the system working exactly as designed. Blake closed his laptop and looked around his small apartment. Furniture from Facebook Marketplace. No art on the walls. No expensive watches or designer clothes visible. All of it sold to cover basic expenses. His phone buzzed. A text from Tiffany, his ex-wife. They'd divorced 6 weeks ago. "Need you to send the last support payment. My rent is due." Tiffany had moved back in with her parents in Orange County. Her influencer career was finished. Brands wouldn't touch her. Followers had abandoned her. The lifestyle she'd built on borrowed credibility had collapsed completely. She'd tried to rebrand as an accountability influencer, posting about learning from mistakes and growing from failure. But people saw through it. Her apologies felt hollow because they were hollow. She was sorry for the consequences, not the actions. Blake typed a response: "I'll send what I can. Money's tight." He meant it. His bank account showed $847. His crypto holdings, which had once been worth 8 figures, were now worth less than a used Honda Civic. He'd been forced to fly commercial for a work interview last month. Southwest Airlines. Middle seat, between a crying baby and a man who fell asleep on his shoulder. The flight attendant had looked at him with vague recognition but said nothing. When he'd tried to order a vodka tonic, his card had been declined. He'd sat there sober and humiliated for 3 hours. The system Blake had spent years gaming, the system where influence and noise and perceived importance opened doors that system had finally closed its doors to him. Permanently. But in the quiet of his small apartment, something was beginning to shift. Not redemption. Not yet. But awareness. He pulled up the video of the incident on his laptop. Forced himself to watch it fully for the first time. Really watch it. Not looking for ways to justify his behavior or minimize his responsibility. Just watching. He saw himself looming over Dr. Harper. Saw the smirk on his face. Heard the entitlement in his voice. Watched himself interrupt, dismiss, belittle. And for the first time he saw what everyone else had seen. A bully. A person so consumed with his own perceived importance that he'd forgotten other people were human. He closed the laptop and sat in silence. Then he did something he hadn't done in 3 months. He picked up his phone and searched for therapists specializing in narcissistic personality traits and entitlement disorders. He scheduled a consultation for the following week. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't even the beginning of redemption. But it was the first genuine step toward becoming someone different than the man in that video. Whether he'd follow through, whether he'd do the real work of change that remained to be seen. But for the first time since the incident, Blake Ashford was looking in a mirror and seeing himself clearly. And what he saw made him deeply, profoundly ashamed. Simone Harper sat on the deck of her rented cabin in Aspen, watching the morning sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and amber. Steam rose from her coffee cup, curling into the crisp mountain air like visible contentment. This vacation, her first real vacation in over 2 years, had finally happened. 4 days of silent solitude and the worn Toni Morrison novel she'd been trying to finish for 6 months. She'd turned off her work email, set her phone to only accept calls from Luis Amanda and family, given herself permission to simply exist without performing or producing or proving. And in that stillness, she'd found something she hadn't realized she'd been missing: peace. On the small table beside her sat a letter. Actual paper, actual handwriting sent to her office and forwarded by Luis with a note. "I think you'll want to read this." The envelope was worn, the paper inside it soft from being unfolded and refolded many times. The handwriting was her mother's familiar loops and curves that made Simone's chest ache with recognition. The letter had been written 2 weeks before her mother's death 5 years ago. Simone had found it in her mother's things, but hadn't been able to read it until now. The grief had been too fresh, the words too precious to rush. But this morning, in the quiet of the mountains, she'd finally opened it. "My darling Simone," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. But my words stay with you, just like I promised they would. You've always had fire in you. Even as a little girl, when that gate agent tried to move us from our seats, I saw it in your eyes. Not anger, but understanding. You knew even at 8 years old that what was happening was wrong. I couldn't fight it that day. I was too tired, too worn down by years of fighting battles just to exist. But I saw you watching me, learning from my weakness, vowing to be stronger. And you have been. Stronger than I ever was. Smarter than I could have dreamed. You're going to build something great. I know this in my bones, the same way I know the sun will rise and the seasons will change. It's not a hope, it's a certainty. When you do remember this, power isn't about what you can take from the world. It's about what you can give back. When someone tries to make you small, don't shrink. But don't become them either. Don't let their smallness infect your soul. Get strong. Get smart. And when you have the power, use it to make sure nobody else feels the way we felt that day. The way we've felt 1,000 days since. Not just for black women like us. For everyone who's been looked at and found wanting. For everyone who's been dismissed based on appearance. For everyone who's been told they don't belong in spaces they've earned the right to occupy. That's your purpose, baby. Not building companies or making money or winning awards. Those are just tools. Your real purpose is to look at broken things and fix them. To see injustice and refuse to accept it. I'm so proud of you. Not for what you've achieved, but for who you are. For the girl who looked at that empty first-class seat and decided the world could be better. For the woman who's making sure it is. I love you. Always have. Always will. Now go change everything. Mama Simone folded the letter carefully, her hands trembling slightly. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. "I did it, Mama," she whispered to the mountains. "I got strong. I got smart. And I used the power." Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie Kim, Ms. Harper. "Sorry to interrupt your vacation. Just wanted to tell you something. A passenger came through today. Black woman traveling alone, dressed simply. Our staff treated her perfectly. When she got to her gate, she called back to the lounge to say it was the first time in 30 years of flying that she felt truly seen. Thought you'd want to know." Simone read the message 3 times, emotion rising in her chest like a tide. This was the victory. Not headlines or awards or industry recognition. But one woman, anonymous and quiet feeling, seen for the first time. Another text, this one from Michael Grant, the journalist article published. Just wanted you to know the response has been overwhelming. 3 more airlines implementing similar policies. Your story is becoming the template. You did it. Simone set her phone down and picked up her coffee. It had gone lukewarm, but she sipped it anyway, looking out at the mountains. She thought about 8-year-old Simone sitting in the back of that plane, watching empty seats that should have been theirs. She thought about 24-year-old Simone, humiliated in an airport coding late into the night to build something different. She thought about 45-year-old Simone standing in a lounge she owned, being told she didn't belong, making the decision that would change everything. All of those versions of herself connected by a single thread, the refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. But something made her answer. Dr. Harper. A man's voice, uncertain, broken. This is she. This is Blake Ashford. Simone went still, her coffee cup suspended halfway to her lips. I know I have no right to call. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not because I want anything from you, but because you deserve to hear it. The mountains seemed to hold their breath. Simone was silent for a long moment, watching the aspen trees shimmer gold in the morning light. Mr. Ashford, she finally said. Her voice measured. Apologies are meaningless without change. I know, Blake said quickly. I'm in therapy. I've been going twice a week for the past month. I'm trying to understand why I was the way I was, why I thought I could treat people like that. Another pause. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that what you did, it mattered. You held up a mirror, and I finally saw what I'd become. And it was ugly. Simone closed her eyes, considering. This could be manipulation. It could be another performance. But the brokenness in his voice sounded real. Mr. Ashford, she said slowly. I'm not going to absolve you. That's not my job. But I will tell you this. Change is possible if you're willing to do the work. Real work. Not for show. Not for redemption. But because you genuinely want to become someone different. I do, Blake said. I really do. Then call me in a year, Simone said. Show me receipts of therapy, of volunteer work, of actual growth. Show me you've made amends where possible and changed where it's not. Then we'll talk. Thank you, Blake whispered. Thank you for even listening. Simone hung up without responding. She set the phone down and looked back at the mountains. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. But the door to redemption opened just a crack, because that's what real power looked like. Not revenge, not destruction, but the grace to allow someone the possibility of becoming better, even when they didn't deserve it, especially when they didn't deserve it. She picked up her mother's letter and read the last line one more time. Now go change everything. A gentle breeze rustled the aspen trees, their golden leaves shimmering like 1,000 tiny coins. The sun was higher now, its warmth chasing the last of the morning chill from her skin. Dr. Simone Harper, leader of an empire, finally felt the profound, quiet satisfaction of a difficult job well done. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath of the pure mountain air, and for the first time in a very long time, felt truly at peace. Dr. Simone Harper didn't just shut down an airline that day. She shut down a culture that told people their dignity was conditional, that respect had to be earned through appearance, through volume, through matching someone else's idea of important. Blake Ashford and Tiffany learned that character has consequences, not immediate, not theatrical, but persistent, the kind that reshapes your life in ways you can't charm or buy or influence your way out of. Richard Caldwell and Jennifer Martinez learned that enabling injustice carries the same weight as committing it. That silence in the face of discrimination isn't neutrality, it's participation. But the real heroes of this story weren't the ones with power. They were the witnesses who found their voices. Dr. Elena Torres, who recorded when it would have been easier to look away. George Mitchell, who spoke up despite decades of staying silent. Sophie Kim, who quit rather than participate in humiliation. Michael Grant, who documented truth when spin would have been safer. They learned that change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept extraordinary cruelty as normal. The woman who was told she didn't belong, she owned the place. And she used that power not to punish, but to transform. Not to destroy, but to rebuild. Not to seek revenge, but to establish a standard where dignity wasn't negotiable. Today, Sky-Alight executive flights is considered the gold standard in private aviation, not for luxury, but for humanity. Their training program has been adopted by 47 companies and counting. Sophie Kim now trains staff across the industry, teaching others that speaking up isn't just brave, it's essential. The Federal Aviation Administration uses their model as the baseline for new industry standards. What started as one woman refusing to be dismissed became a movement that reshaped how an entire industry sees its passengers. Blake Ashford flies commercial now, middle seat, coach. The flag in his file follows him quietly, a digital shadow he can't escape. But he's in therapy, finally doing the work of understanding how entitlement poisoned his character. It's slow going, it's painful, but he's trying. And trying at least is honest. And Dr. Simone Harper. She finished her vacation. 4 full days in Aspen, no interruptions, no crises. She read her mother's letter every morning, feeling the weight of legacy and promise fulfilled. She returned to work, refreshed and ready, not because the fight was over, but because she'd finally learned something essential. You can't change everything, but you can change your corner of everything. And if everyone does that, eventually everything changes. If this story moved you, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that like button. It tells YouTube to share this story with more people who need to hear it. Second, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We share stories like this every week. Stories about justice, dignity, and people who refuse to stay silent. Don't miss the next one. Third, and this is the most important, share this video. Send it to someone who's been dismissed or underestimated. Send it to someone who stayed silent when they should have spoken up. Send it to someone who needs to know that standing up for what's right always matters, even when it's hard. Drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from and whether you've ever experienced something like this. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And when we share our stories, we build communities that refuse to accept injustice. The quiet ones, the dignified ones, the ones who hold their heads high even when the world tries to bow them down, those are the ones who change everything. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be recognized to be valuable. You just have to be clear about who you are and refuse to let anyone else define that for you. Respect isn't reserved for the recognized. It's owed to the human. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being part of the change. Now go make your corner of the world better.